So my guest is a singer, songwriter, actor, director, but he also happens to be an author, and we're here to talk about his new book. And he also happens to be my business partner because we've been business partners for God knows like 46 years or something like that. So here he is,
Yeah, it's got to be 40, yeah, 46 or 47.
Mr. Dee Snider. Hey, bud.
Hey, man, how you doing? Well,
Good, good.
I know I'm not, I know this to be a true statement I'm going to make. My friend, because you're my friend, and I know I'm your friend, and we went through the war together, and I'm glad best thing that came out of reuniting to me was reconnecting with all you guys as people and as friends, and to talk to Mark, to talk to Eddie, talk to you, and just we went through so much. It always bothered me, as you say, Twisted Sister came in like a lion and went out like a lamb at the end of the 80s, and it always bothered me. We should have spontaneously combusted, something more dramatic. But we reunited, we got through the past, and then we ended on a real high note. So
Yeah, we did. That last show was rather interesting too. For me, it was weird because Kiss was the headliner that night. And if you think about it, I auditioned for them in 72. It was kind of like a bookend for me, philosophically weird bookend to go through that. Also recently I've been interviewed a lot about the New York Dolls, and the Dolls, because I saw them a lot back in 72. And I saw, Kiss rehearse in the Loft in 72. I remember thinking the Dolls look great, but they couldn't play. And Kiss, believe it or not, in that Loft, they had it together. I mean, they knew exactly what they were going for. They sounded like Slade. That's what they were into. They're into the heavy bands. They had Marshall amplifiers. People do not understand. American bands did not use Marshall amps, except for Jimi Hendrix. It was the British bands using Marshalls. When Kiss had Marshalls in their Loft, and they knew exactly what they were going for. So it's amazing.
It's interesting because you told me, so Wicked Lester was the band you were in for a minute, and I often quote that when Gene and Paul came down to see you perform, and afterwards they met you, and Gene says, "Take off your glasses. You're better without them. You look too Jewish." And that's what he said to you. Yeah, John Lennon glasses. You were too Jewish. Chaim Witz called you too. Unbelievable. But anyway, they were kind of Crosby, Stills, and Nashish. You said they weren't really.
No, the Wicked Lester tapes were not what I saw them as Kiss when they have changed over.
No, I'm saying, but Wicked Lester.
But yeah, the Wicked Lester tapes. So yeah.
Kind of traditional.
Not only that, it sounded like Jethro Tull. They played. They had like recorders. She walks by moonlight flutes, like do 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 do. No one really knows. And then
what you're saying is, John, is that this is a really thought out, planned out change for them. John, they went from Wicked Lester and that sort of lighter rock sound, and decided we are going to embrace a more hard rock style. We're going to look more hard rock. The makeup, everything was very thought out, which, knowing, at Gene as the world does, it's kind of not surprising.
Well, don't forget too, I shifted from Grateful Dead to like Martha Hoople overnight, to Bowie Mott.
True. That's true. Yeah.
I woke up one day and went, this sucks.
An epiphany. You wanted to rock, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're here today because you got a book, and man, this book, I'm holding it up here. If this one's up on YouTube, book is called Frats. Now we're going to get into why it's called Frats. Do you remember, Dee? Do you remember a political commentator named Chris Matthews used to have a political show?
Yeah. I was the voice of MSNBC, John.
So you knew. That's right. So
in the Line of Fire tonight at 8 with Chris Matthews in the Line of Fire tonight at 8 on MSNBC. I did that for a year.
So the reason why I bring that up is because he used to tag the end of his shows with a question to all his guests. And his question was, tell me something I don't know. That was always his question. Well, that really applies to this book, because this was something I did not know. In fact, not only did I not know this, most people do not know this. And in the book, the opening of the book, when you have your protagonist, Bobby Kovac, in a car with some people from work, and he's stuck in a bad traffic jam, and he sees a license plate that says DGN on the license plate. And he makes a comment, well, there was a frat, back in the day, which was, I guess, Delta Gamma Nu. And he made a comment, and someone said, what frat? In college? And he said, no, in high school. And they said they had frats in high school. So how did you know? Did you know this? Like, how did the story evolve?
Well, I grew up in Baldwin, Long Island, where the old 1890s club used to be when we were playing. And it just was the way of the world. It was the world. And in elementary school, the frats were people you want to stay away from. Different frats were worse than others, but they were all kind of troublemakers and tough guys. So I grew up in this world where you say, okay, well, don't go past that store, or don't go down this street, walk around this block. It was just like a minefield that I knew existed. And then in junior high, the same. And then in high school, I was just a big weird dude. In the book, I'm one of the Bretts. I'm not one of the guys in the frats. I'm one of the dorks. That the Bretts in the book, which is the reference I'm making, that's me, Don Manello, and a guy, Ray, I can't remember his name. The three of us, we used to sit at our lunch table, and between planning on robbing the bank across the street, alternately, we'd observe the fraternities and all their antics and what they did, and try not to get in their way. So but to me, that was just the world, I mean, I remember, this is true. I remember getting a class that required me to go past the shop area where they hung out. And in order to, because I was a big, the brown afro, it's just a weird dude, platform shoes. And I went outside in the dead of winter every day and walked around the back of the school just to avoid having to be harassed by these guys. But this was just the world. When I started to travel with the band and I bring it up, people would say, high school fraternities? What's that? And then I start telling them, and they were basically just gangs, and they were very violent. And when I would tell them the stories, people were very interested. So I started to think that maybe there was a tale to tell. But I often wondered, what if you didn't grow up there? What if you didn't know the lay of the land? What if you transferred there, like many kids do? You walked in the first day of school, not knowing it was a minefield, and walked right onto a mine. And that's what Bobby Kovacs does. Pretty much the first day of school, he crosses somebody and it changes his life forever.
Now, you did not know that these frats, these high school gangs existed on the North Shore or in Suffolk County or in New Jersey. You had no idea that only this geographical area that you grew up with.
They were everywhere. It was Baldwin, Freeport, Oceanside, Uniondale, Hempstead,
Valley Stream,
Rockville Center. That southern area of Nassau County, not North Shore, not Suffolk. It didn't go into Suzette. Was in Belmore, only a couple of towns away. Nope, didn't exist.
No kidding. They didn't exist. They didn't exist that far east. They stopped.
It was a microcosm.
When did these frats start? How did they actually begin? Like in the 50s? Like when did this go on?
Pretty interesting, actually. So the first fraternity started in Brooklyn at an engineering school. And it was Omega Gamma Delta. I had to change all the names and colors for legal reasons. But Omega Gamma Delta, well, actually, the oldest frat in the country is a Jewish frat. It's black, it's purple and white. And it is the oldest frat, Jews only, but they had one in my high school. I can't remember the letters of that frat. But Omega,
was that Tau Zeta Epsilon, or is that your invention?
That's my invention. I forgot what that. I used to have everybody's names. I know them by heart, but I had to change them, so it kind of screwed it up. But Omega Gamma Delta was the first fraternity, high school fraternity, started at an engineering school in Brooklyn. Steve Buscemi was a member of Omega Gamma Delta. Yeah, he was a member of Omega, but Omega Gamma Delta was the premier, and I can't believe Buscemi was in there. Premier athletes, students, white Christians. You had to be a white Christian or you could not be an Omega Gamma Delta. That was the first one. Then some people out in Nassau County who had relatives in Brooklyn, they started up their own chapter. I don't know whatever happened to the chapter in Brooklyn, but it faded away, I think. But all of a sudden, from Omega Gamma Delta, other fraternities started because there were people who weren't white Christians and they wanted to be in a frat. They were jocks, so they started green and red. That's the one. The colors are all different. That's the frat that Bobby's in. They were jocks, but they allowed people who weren't white. They allowed people who weren't Christians. And then other frats started because everybody wanted sort of their clique. They wanted their group to sort of protect them. And that is in the book. And this is where I know the evil frat very intimately, because it was started by Scott Hoffner. They were called Alpha Omega Theta. Their name is different in the book, but they weren't an evil frat. Scott was just trying to create a group for the stoners to protect themselves from getting their asses kicked by all the other frats. Everybody wanted, but by picking the word Alpha, which another fraternity had their name, they became a target for that fraternity who were offended. They used the same Greek letter in their name. So Scott Hoffner told me that the first few years they wore track shoes and they just ran all day long because they were going to get beat up for wearing colors. Then Scott, the brilliant one, got the idea to start recruiting. Normally you recruit high schoolers. He started recruiting in junior high, getting the toughest junior high kids, and then, bringing them up. So when they got in high school, they were already not only in his fraternity, but they hated the other frats. And Roger Hoffner, his brother, became one of the biggest, most deadliest, most badass of members of that fraternity. And the whole tone, once those kids grew up, now it became like almost a biker mentality fraternity. They're really more of a gang. It was all about violence. And I became best friends with Roger for a very long time. So I really got to hear about that fraternity and what it was like to be in the evil fraternity, in detail. So I really have a lot of real information about the fraternity system, even though I wasn't in it.
What was the tipping point where they went from just, arrogant jocks to violence? Like what was the instigator for that? Because, these guys all started out, I'm assuming, as you point out, it was jocks, it was people at the top of their class. That was a frat. That was supposed to be what it's supposed. When did it turn bad? Like in the late 60s? What happened there?
Well, it started in the 60s, I think, is the first frat started. So by the 70s, that's when I was in. It was at its height, full blown. By the early 80s, it was banned. And the story, as I said, is based on actual events. The event that Bobby Kovacs, that's the event that ended. I don't want to give it away, but what happened to him happened to somebody, and that was the end of the frat system because people were dying, and it was getting so ugly. And what happened was basically competition was created. First, when it was just the first Omega Gamma Delta, it was just one frat, and then you just were like, hey, we're the jocks, and we're blah blah. But then all of a sudden, there is, another fraternity, Alpha Omega Theta. Now it's another frat, and now they have competition. As more and more frats started, the friction started because there was, sort of turf and that whole turf thing going on. Who hangs out where? One of the things I talk about in the book, and this is a real coming of age story. In the lobby of my school, it was like very highly designated. This frat sat there, that frat sat there, and everybody had their spots, and you couldn't go if you tried to move into another person's spot. It was a war. So it was like that. It was that tense all the time. And again, having grown up there, it just seemed normal. It just seemed old. It sucks, but this is just the way it is.
So you saw it in junior high school. This was coming. You knew this was coming. It's basically,
yeah, they weren't in the junior high, they were in high school, and you knew.
But you in junior high school were aware that this was
in elementary school, I was aware. Elementary school, these guys were all over town wearing their colors, and because they had charters with the police department, they were treated with a certain this legitimacy. They would march in the holiday parades. I just saw, I didn't know that. Like Memorial Day parade, the fraternities with all their jackets on in mass would march through the streets of your town. I saw a picture of Roger Hoffner leading a pack of black and red with a big black and red banner they're holding across the street, and he's walking out in front, and people would cheer as they walked down the streets. you've been to like a Memorial Day parade or Labor Day, any kind of parade, people cheer. They would cheer the Frats as they walk by. But that's how that's the regard they had were held in the school. They were somehow legitimate, even though, people say, what's the difference between a college frat and a high school frat? College frats play beer pong. High school frats rumble. They were always fighting.
You know, you remember that scene in West Side Story in the very first rumble in the schoolyard between the Jets and the Sharks,
Yeah.
and the police show up, and the cop is looking at the Sharks because they're Puerto Rican, and he goes, "Lee, Bernardo, leave, please." But he's looking at the other guy and goes, "Come on, guys, come on, don't do this." Is that kind of that thing? There was like a grudging and a respect for some of these frats, and they let them get away with shit.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, even the police and the authorities knew, and the school, like the dean, they knew who the jock frats and sororities were more legit because they were athletes. Then there was the dirtbag frats, and there was multiple of those. The worst being black and red, different colors in my book, and they were, had the highest disregard by the police and by the teachers and stuff like that, because people knew they were troublemakers, they were up to no good. So there was definitely favoritism.
So in the book, you mentioned delta, zeta, theta. I'm just having fun rattling this stuff off. Beta, lambda, rho, delta, gamma, nu, beta, kappa, phi. I mean, I actually enjoy saying these things. Were these frats ever separated via race or religion, or Italian versus Irish? Was it that part too? Was there any of that aspect going on with these things?
There were two frats that had strict religious rules. That was the Jewish frat. I have my names. I don't know my name. The Jewish frat and the all white Christian frat, and they were very strict about it. And in my book, Bobby Kovacs is, he's a jock, and he grew up on an Air Force base, so he knows some martial arts. So everybody wants him to be in the frat. But the white Christian frat comes up to him and says, "Hey, Kovacs, we'd like to have you in the frat, but you're a Jew, so you can't be in." And Kovac, he's not Jewish. It's just an Eastern European name. It could be Jewish, but he doesn't want to deny, say I'm not Jewish, because he thinks these guys are assholes. So because I'm Jewish, I'm not in. But then he's equally confused by the fact that one of the most group of people that have been the most outcast and the most segregated, Jewish people, they walk up and say, "Hey man, we know you're not Jewish, so you can't be in the frat." So it's like, wow, but the other frats were open. But Baldwin, Long Island, where I grew up, was white. We had two black people. It was white, white, white. Before the high school was built, the Ku Klux Klan had cross burnings on the golf course that the high school was built on. When George Wallace was running, he came to Baldwin, and he was cheered before he pulled out. Baldwin was Wallace country. So there was this, and it was right next to Freeport, which was black, and Roosevelt was black, and Baldwin was white. So, I don't know, it was one black jock, or two black jocks, and they were in, one of the fraternities, but it's hard to say how far the racism went.
So in the book, I'm not going to give this away in any big way. In this car ride, when Bobby mentions the license plate, and they said, "What do you know about these things?" and he pushed his hair out of the way, and people noticed a scar, and that's the entrance to the book. That's the entrance to the story. Why does he have a scar? That's what the entrance, and a big scar.
Yeah.
And you find out exactly what the trail that took. So did you get firsthand information besides from Roger and Scott? Did you talk to anybody else in any of these frats, and how much of this story, because you say based on true events, so all this stuff happened?
Well, even like seeing the license plate with the frat letters on it, that I saw that and riding down the street one time, and I saw that license plate, and I said, "Oh man, that's Alpha Omega Theta," and so that's even little things like that, pieces like that. But both sides, I had the nerd side down, man. I mean, that part where they are running through the backyards to get away from the fraternities, um, and Bobby finds out that this is a rehearsed thing that the geeky kids, the nerdy kids did. That's what we did. We practiced getting away from frats and people like that. We knew like every backyard, every area. We knew how to jump, climb, run around, get the hell out of there. So that's part of the reality of the story. There's a book out called Fraternal Brotherhood, and it's by a member of Alpha Omega Alpha Omega Theta, green and red, which is in reality Bobby's fraternity. And it's all about the inner workings in the 70s. Stuff we heard about, the rumors about Hell Night and the hazing and the meetings and all that stuff. We saw some of it. We didn't know what went on inside the houses. And this guy shares in depth the story, the truth of the story behind the scenes. He doesn't say, but from his point of view, it's called Fraternal Brotherhood. It's a loving ode to his friends that he grew up with, and this great high school memories he has of the years when he was in that fraternity. For me, it was a textbook with information and more details that I could reference. And then, pretty much everything in that book, it's an amalgam. It took pieces of different things. It didn't all just happen to one person. The Jimmy O character, I'm not giving anything away. Those horrible things he did in the end, the horrible, horrible ones, John, when you get to the end, those were done by members of that fraternity.
That really happened. We'll not explain what it is, but it's horrible.
The things that get him finally put away for life, that really happened. So it wasn't Jimmy O as an imaginary character, but it happened to these things all happen to other people. The only thing that really isn't true in there is the inciting incidents, as it's called. And that's where Bobby sees his friend being beat up and he goes in to help him. And that causes all the problems Bobby has. That was a made up situation. It could have happened. It might have happened, but I didn't have like to say, oh yeah, this happened to that guy, So but and then of course the love story, I had to base it on something, so I use a lot of my Suzette and me stuff.
Now, well, yeah, and that among many things. I'm sorry, when I see a name like John Russo, when I see descriptions of Tank, when I see these, you have to remember, Dee, even though I was a Manhattan kid, your inclusion in the band and us playing in Oceanside opened me up to an entirely different scene. And I got to know
for quite a while. You got inserted, so you knew.
Yeah, I knew. Well, look, Lori went to Hicksville High with her brother. He was a jock in Hicksville High. He got drafted by Woody Hayes in Ohio State. I mean, there's that. There's Debbie Cordero. I dated Debbie out of Oceanside. We all went through some really crazy stuff down at Speaks. We saw a whole lot of things. We're going to discuss a little bit about the dovetailing of the timeline, but I want to understand something. Do the principals of these schools know what the hell was going on? Did they really understand that they were holding on to monsters in their respective schools, in their high schools?
They should have. The story that I tell about the War Council, when there was going to be this big rumble with the bad guy frat. And by the way, it's the first time I ever laid eyes on Roger Opner. And Dean Kloberg, who was mentioned, that's actually Dean Kloberg by name, she called the War Council, invited them to the high school to meet with the other frat they were going to rumble with and sit down in the little theater, just like I described it. I wasn't in that room, but they came in, and it was their effort to try to make the peace between the fraternities and stop violence. So there was certainly at least that degree of awareness, for sure.
It just reminds me, when I was in my drug days, I would, my mother entered me into a drug rehab clinic called Alfred Adler, thinking that would cure me, except all I did was meet other drug addicts whose job it was to get as wrecked as we possibly could after we'd met with the counselor. It did absolutely no good. We would leave the session, come to my house and take more acid. It just didn't.
That's what I imagine Sex Addicts Anonymous is like. Like you go there, you meet other sex addicts, and hey, what's up? Let's hook up. Let's go. You're addicted. I'm addicted. Let's go.
Well, how old were you? So you graduated in what year from high school?
1973.
All right, 73, and you joined the band in 76. So you made it out just as the things were, as you left it, it was still high, it was still big time Frats when you left?
Frats were just, the way of the world over there. And, the hyper violence and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It was just the way of the world.
How did they treat the musicians? Were you just all looked on as like crazy hippie outcast weirdos and nobody bothered you, or did you feel threatened yourselves?
So there was, as I said in the book, and I go and lay out the lay of the land, which was really how it was, where Frats, this Frats here, this Frats there. There's the smart kids, they sat against that wall, and then there was the freaks, the freaks, musicians, they were right on the radiator, because that's what they sat on. They were down there right on the same window as fraternities. And there was sort of peaceful coexistence as long as you didn't cross lines. And I don't think, as I say in the book, a lot of the picking on of the nerdier kids and stuff is just boredom. They've got nothing to do. So let's push some of the geeks around. And, but it's not really like a competition. They're not threatened by them. The other fraternities were threatening their existence. But then, my worst experience with Frats was after seeing Clockwork Orange, I decided I was going to wear a derby in school every day.
You never told me that.
No.
You have a picture of that?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I had my fledgling afro, so what a derby on an afro looks like. It's like sticking out the sides. And I'm walking around and I'm wearing my Flag Brothers platform shoes. So I'm like 6'7", and walking around with a derby on. And that was just too much for one of the fraternities. It's like, all right, this guy's got to go. And they shoved me and stole my friggin' derby, beat me up and stole my derby. And otherwise they kind of left me alone, but I was just annoying the shit out of them because I was just too much of a freak. But instead, as they say, rather than withdrawing and being less loud and less obvious, I just started getting louder and louder, hence our band,
Did you play in a high school band at that time?
Yes,
with Don Manello, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, and with the drummer, Joey Stefko.
Joe Stefko. Joey Stefko was in the bad fraternity. He was in Black and Red.
Joey was?
Joey Stefko, drummer, played with Meatloaf and Flo and Eddie and the Turtles, legendary drummer. And I actually, he helped me with the book. He was another source and did a proofread for me and stuff like that. And he explained, I said, dude, you were in Black and Red. First I saw him in another frat. He goes, yeah, I was just kind of, they call me drummer. And I was just kind of entertainment for them. They hung out at my house and I played drums and they thought it was cool. So they sort of let me slide. But he said I really wasn't a badass. They just took me in. He said I was a pet. So I got his name in there, Marky Creeder. Creeder is what they used to call my brother, Mark Snider. Marky, they used to call him Mark Creeder for some reason. So Marky Mofo Creeder. So I use a lot of names from the past and things like that. There's one Easter egg. I make one appearance in the book. It's an Easter egg, and it's at the prom, and the band Dusk is playing, D-U-S-K. And Bobby says, he says they were the band that played all the dances and stuff. The singer went on to become pretty famous. Well, I was in Dusk, and we were the band. By my senior year, we had this weird acceptance because you'd be like these dirtbag frat guys that you were sort of running away from and staying away from. Yet at the dances, they go, "Hey man, can you play Run 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 by JoJo Gunn?" And all of a sudden they were like these sort of geeky people who like being in the band, and all of a sudden they're like looking up to you. So so my band was the band for a while there.
Yeah, well, back during the worst of the Northern Ireland conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants, the nightclubs were out of bounds. You couldn't touch the music. You couldn't touch the bands. Like, someone needs to entertain these crazies, and so they were pretty much left alone. And that's kind of what you're saying here. They kind of like just kind of acknowledged you need entertainment at the apocalypse, don't you?
Need someone to play some music for us. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, exactly. There's a great documentary about that Miami Sound Machine or something, that Irish band that got killed in the streets. Oh, one of like the biggest club bands. But they were traveling from one gig to another one night, and they got pulled over, and they were all slaughtered. It's a really interesting story. I'm probably blowing the whole thing, but you'll find it. It's a great.
So as so 1976 you join us, and now we're playing, and of course I'm blissfully unaware of this crazy world and history that you had in the high schools. Did you ever see these people show up at any of the gigs? I mean, did they show up at 1890? Did they show up at Hammerheads in Levittown? Did you ever see these people again?
Well, my modus operandi was just stay in the back. I never went out and walked around, so I wouldn't have had the opportunity to cross their paths if they were there. Only thing I do know is that when Newsday did an article on me after we broke, everybody they interviewed was my friend. Everybody knew me, and nobody. I was very unpopular. I just had a handful. There was Manello and Ray, sitting at our lunchroom table, and then there was the Hausers, Willie and David Hauser. I had a handful of friends. I was just, and then I had my musician friends, but I really didn't work too well with them because I didn't party or get high. So yeah, I could sing, but then afterwards, I really wasn't fun to hang around with, as you well know. So
did you create the character of John Russo in memory of the great John Russo, by the way?
I did. John in One Punch Russo.
That's Johnny One Punch Russo for sure.
Yeah, and John Russo was one of our bodyguards, one of the most lethal people I ever met. So we it's funny being the musician type, art types that we were. We attracted a lot of pretty tough people. Some really tough people.
Yeah, Sal, Orca, the whole crew. Roger, of course.
And they loved us. Again, everybody needs music, I guess. And they became very protective of us being their band. We never, there's, plenty of nights where I've jumped off the stage and gotten a shoving match with somebody or whatever. But we had these tough fans who just were drawn to our attitude, drawn to what we were doing, and they were very, very protective of the band.
They were.
Became our bodyguards, and a lot of them eventually went on tour with us internationally.
Yeah, they and John Russo unfortunately was murdered. I not long, probably about. In fact, at the Long Island Music Hall of Fame, I met the guy who was his roommate at the time he was murdered, and we talked about Johnny. And Johnny was an interesting character because not only was he the toughest guy in the world, but he was a Chuck Berry lunatic. Remember, he could sing every Chuck Berry, and he played Chuck Berry guitar style. He was so insane.
I remember the first time we saw him and his brother. Showing up every night, and they'd be like right in the front with the girls, like these, and they were built like washing machines. I mean, they were like big, and would be the whole set just be like, pumping the fist in the air. And eventually we took him in, and again, it's sad that he passed. Again, he defended our honor more times than not,
Many times. Fought himself out of a van at remember they tried to kidnap him down at in Jamesburg at Emmett's Inn. He disappeared for 2 hours, and he came back, and he was kidnapped in the parking lot, and he beat the crap out of everybody in the van and came back. He was covered in blood. How would it happen?
Bad guy to kidnap.
Oh my God. Bad guy.
Big mistake. This guy, and he wasn't super tall. One of the things we learned was bodyguards need to have size, because when they're smaller, usually the smaller guys are the toughest guys, but they get tested. So John was always, getting into fights because people thought, I can take him. No, you can't. You can't.
Tell me this about, because I know Roger and Scott really, really, really well, and in their heart of hearts, they're very decent people. I mean, their heart of hearts. Were they protectors I can't imagine they were in the violent frats, right? They were just, was Roger violent?
Yes.
Was he?
Scott started the evil frat, and Roger made it the evilest frat.
So Roger was that bad.
Yeah. But understand, what I came to understand, like, why were they so hate-filled? Because Scott, who started the frat with a bunch of stoners, was getting persecuted by the other frats. He brought in younger kids, including his brother, and groomed them to protect the frat and hate the other frats who were persecuting them. So when they grew up, they had chips on their shoulders for these other frats who were always picking on them. And now suddenly, you didn't want to pick on Scott, and that you didn't want to pick on Roger, I should say.
Roger, right.
And there was a lot of Rogers in those fraternities. So they just became vengeful, and they just had this built-in hatred of all the other fraternities that came from being picked on. So, I mean, so there was sort of a, not honorable, but you understand where it came from, how they came to be so hateful to the other fraternities.
Yeah. Well, in the book, there's an arc about the relationship between Bobby and his girlfriend, eventually how that works out. So there's a bit of a romantic streak in there, which of course I see an awful lot of how you drew Suzette in this.
Suzette, yeah. But let me just say about that. So there's things that, I wasn't a frat, but I was in a band, and I was able to identify with a lot of what Bobby did. Like Bobby, when he was with the guys, he would make the mistake of ignoring his girlfriend and going with the guys and hanging with the guys and thinking she's okay. I did that too many times at Suzette in a club. You know what I mean? Oh, she's cool. She's talking to, the other girls. Yeah, she's all right. And then go off with the friends. So this is a mistake a lot of guys make, I think, sometimes and during their lives. And so I understood the idea of being with a group of guys who have a huge influence over you, who you don't want to disappoint, you don't want to alienate. They're your brothers, and you guys, in my case, my band and my crew and all those people, and you kind of sometimes, and so I understood the idea, and I had Suzette go home on her own a couple of nights, exactly like it is in the book. Just get a cab and leave. And what happened to you? Where'd you go? Said you disappeared and you left me standing, and I said, well, he's gone. I'm going, So, except she didn't say it that nicely.
Yeah, but in the book, there's a confrontation where Bobby's going to this war council essentially, and she's going, "You and your stupid fraternities, like you just want to kill each other." It reminds me of that scene in West Side Story when Bernardo and Anita are coming off the roof, and he's going, "I must go to war council." She goes, "A war council? Are you serious? Like, what are you idiots doing?" It reminded me of that same mentality of the woman's going, use some common sense here. This is bullshit here, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's Bobby recognizes it immediately when he comes to the school. They wanted to be the frats. He's like, you know what? My senior year, it's too much drama. Clearly, you can see it's drama, and there's this hazing going on, and I just want to finish my year. And he wants to play lacrosse. I mean, he's kind of there, and he gets sucked into it. But once you're in there, the drama seems important. And then this guy did that and slighted you and did that to him. And now you have to defend his honor and her honor. And all of a sudden now the drama becomes part of your life. And it's just high school bullshit. Most people know, and and I know, life begins after high school. The day I walked out that door, I never looked back. I never thought about it again. There's no glory days. But there are people whose lives begin and end when they leave high school or college. That's the greatest days of their life. Those people are there forever. He said, but it's just bullshit. But those people, that was everything, and he gets sucked into that world.
Yeah. Question. Did you write every word yourself? Did you have anybody work with you on the writing? Because I'll tell you, it flows beautifully. The story takes you right away. I mean, once I started reading the book, I went through it. I couldn't put it down. I thought the flow was really great. Did you get help in that?
Myself? So I mean, so I started writing after the Twisted videos took off. When Twisted videos took off, some people say to me, "Hey man, you seem to be hooked to the Zet guys. You got any other ideas?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, in my head." And they go, "No, like a script or it." So I started. I don't know if you remember, but I started.
You were writing all the time. I know you were
writing in my, and I just started teaching myself to write. That was 40 years ago, and I've been writing, and it's a craft like anything, And you and I both know they talk about the 10,000 hours. Well, I put in my 10,000 hours, and after I wrote my memoirs, I felt, you know what, I think I'm ready to write a novel. So I can write, and every word I did myself, and it's kind of what I like to do now. It's because it's very freeing. I'm not limited by my age, my color, my sex, anything, my physicality. It's if I can create a character that people will read and believe is believable, I've done my job. It doesn't matter who I am behind the typewriter, and I love that about writing.
Well, you did it. You did it. And the
Thank you.
book is called Frats. And
Thank
it's
you.
a
I
really
like the favorite thing. You and Suzette said, I'm cutting you off. They said basically the same thing to me after you read the book. You basically said the same thing. You said, I don't need to blow more smoke up your ass, but it was really good. Suzette was, your ego's big enough already, but the book's really good. But it was like, both of you were kind of
I
like,
hate to tell you this.
I
I
don't
hate
want to read into what's already going on.
like
But
if it's
yeah.
really sucked and I had to force myself through this interview and be like, but no, the minute I did it, I went, wow, you gotta be on. You gotta talk about it. You gotta
Thank you.
promote it. How do people get this now?
Look, it should be in every store. It's available through every store, but you'll go to stores, they won't have it. So tell them they need to order it. But of course, there's Amazon, there's online outlets. They'll deliver it. Prime will deliver it tomorrow. So and then I'm just right now I'm working on the audio because there's a certain group of people who only do audiobooks.
Yeah, I know. You know why? Because on my book, I wanted to do it, and they said you gotta hire a guy to do it. So I wish I did it myself, but I hired a professional guy who did my
Oh,
audio.
did they?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Because you got a good voice, but I mean, I've been doing voiceovers, so reading copy is pretty unnatural to me now. So I'm able to do it. But yeah, but people like, so the audiobook's coming. You've got, actually, I'm looking what you got, and I realized you got a reader's copy. The reader's copy is the copies we send, advanced copies to people who are going to read it and let us know if there's mistakes. So when I was reading doing my reads, I was using a reader's copy. I'm going, wait a second, there's mistakes in here. And then I said, what the hell was this? And then I realized when I went and checked the actual copy that came out, I said, oh, this is why you send out copies to a bunch of trusted people and they read it for you to say, oh, there's some problems. Anyway, but thank you for that.
I had a historical mistake in my book, and one of Sharon's cousins caught it, so I know he read the book. He said, "By the way, this couldn't have happened that year," and he was right. That had nothing to do with Twisted. Obviously, it was like something about it was in history, and he couldn't. And also, there was another funny anecdote which I'll tell you off camera about a conversation with Jimmy Vazana. You remember Jimmy V, right?
Yeah,
From Chaucer's,
yeah.
He called me. He read the book and he had an interesting comment to make, which I'll tell you later. Anyway, what do you got coming up? You get shows coming? Are you doing some stuff? What are you doing?
I have fully retired from performing. Fully. I just came back and did a few songs with Bret Michaels. I'll do something like that. Kings of Chaos. I do a few songs, just like, but to do a 90 hour 45, 2 hours, 25 songs. No. I don't even know if I don't even know. You once said you're the most self-loathing frontman I have ever met. You said that to me, and it was true. I was so tortured by my love of performing and love of rock and roll and my hate of it at the same time, like how seriously I took it, but also it just, I don't know. I'm a tortured artist. I was, that. But I'm done with that. So I do appearances, go do signings. I've been doing book signings. Going to be directing a movie, My Enemy's Enemy. What's this stupid? I don't want to say stupid strike. I'm an actor, so it's not stupid at all. Actually, it's very good.
Oh, it's a frustrating strike. It's extremely frustrating.
It's frustrating because you can't work and stuff like that. But same time, it's much needed. I'm a union guy to the core. I'm sure you are, and your family were as well. But that's all I'm really doing. I'm trying to just embrace life, and you are too. We're blessed. We made it out the other side.
Yeah.
There's so many who have not, and whether they died, and you knew many who died, or whatever, or they're unable to keep their shit together enough that they can take a breath and can enjoy the fruits of their labors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I see some of our peers out there, and they were once playing arenas, and now they're playing bars, and their health is gone, their voices are gone, and you go, "Why are you doing it?" And you realize because they've got nothing else. It's all they can do. and you can't blame them for that. So thankfully, we've been able to, to thrive and survive.
Yeah. So just for all the listeners out there, there's a Twisted Sister 40th anniversary Under the Blades coming out at the end of the month. And that the second, it's a double vinyl record. The second vinyl album is us for the first time playing covers. As you know, Zeppelin, Aerosmith. Remember we ran through all the songs? Yeah. I said it's going to be on an album finally.
That's awesome. Under the covers?
It's gonna be yeah, that's cute. It's gonna be the 40th anniversary of Under the Blade. And the insert of the album is all those photos that we took recording the album in down in battle. Remember you and me running through the barbed wire, all that crazy
bloody jogging. Bloody jogging. We're not like English bloody jogging. We're really bloody.
With the amplifiers are covered with hay bales because we recorded in a barn. I think people will find those photos interesting. Also, coming up 40th anniversary of You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And then, of course, next May is the 40th anniversary of We're Not Going to Take It. And we're having discussions right now with the label as to what they're going to do. And I said to them, what they should really consider doing, and I hope they do it, is that the concert that we did for MTV, the live Stay Hungry concert that we did, has never been released on audio. It's only been released on a video. Oh, so wow. I'd like them to release it as a CD, as a double package with Stay Hungry.
That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah. So we're working on.
Of course, you saw that flash mob in Czech Republic.
In Hungary.
In Hungary, was it?
In Hungary, yeah.
So we're not going to take it. That's what we need. We need
400 musicians. If you haven't watched it, folks, go to YouTube. Put in "We're Not Going to Take It." Hungry, not Stay Hungry, the country Hungry, and watch this video. It will blow your mind. 400 musicians, I think 100 guitar players, 100 drummers, 100 bass players, and they're playing We're Not Going to Take It to like 30,000 people. It is crazy.
The drummers are my favorite. Just seeing that synchronized, that amazing, AJ, may he rest in peace, and I'm talking to the audience, not talking to you, John, here. So underrated child prodigy, worked with Gene Krupa as a child, was little Anthony Pirro and leading a swing band.
Tony Little.
Picture of him under the Eiffel Tower with like a full orchestra in front of him, and he's up there on a riser. Such a talented guy, very frustrated to be made to play like a monkey by me, play simple, straight rock and roll, because he was, as Mike Portnoy, who said and this is the fact that Mike replaced him, that AJ is so underrated. But I said to AJ, I'm thinking for the beginning of the song, we're not going to take it, a drum cadence, like you hear a marching band play. I always remember loving, I was the announcer for the Baldwin High School marching band. So when they would come out, boop, tap, boop, tap, boop, tap, boop, tap, boop, anything, any college game, I love that. And I said, AJ, if we had a cadence, it'd be cool. And he comes in next day, and it's just real drummers. They know this is a very complicated little kit. It's a brilliant cadence, and it's nice to see that actually marching bands do play it now at football games and stuff. When they do, we're not going to take it. But when seeing all those drummers there honoring AJ, every single one of them, with their cowbells, amazing.
It is amazing, everybody. And that's a legacy that continues on. And that's why Twisted Sister can continue on, because of the songs that you wrote. So let's put that out there, man. You realize that you've written a song that has transcended cultures and ages. And there are very few songs that do that in this world. And you have written a couple of them. I Want to Rock and We're Not Going to Take It.
We're Not Going to Take It is, it's like a folk song at this point.
Yeah. It is a folk song.
It will live on, and but the inspiration, of all these songs is this statements that we were making, I was making, came from what we went through, man.
Yeah.
I tell people, 10 years. People watch the documentary and they're stunned. 10 years. I say, if someone came up to me and said, Dee, all your dreams are going to come true. You'll become a rich, famous rock and roll star, but it's going to take 10 years. I would have looked at them and said, yeah, I'll do something else. If I knew it was going to take 10 years up front, I'd be a doctor. I mean, a lawyer, something, you know, it only takes 8 years to be a doctor, I think.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
know what I used to say? I used to say that when I watched the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show on February 9th, 1964, and I said to my parents, that's what I want to do. If someone put their hand on my shoulder and said, okay, John, you will have a gold record 20 years and 6 months from now, I think I would have said, are you out of your fucking...
Exactly. And the stars in our eyes thinking we're going to be discovered in the basement, you know? So, you know, it's, yeah. So, I mean, the things that I created were inspired by what we went through, you know? We went through hell.
We did.
And it's nice that, you know, we've gotten as the recognition we've gotten and more. And people, as the years go by, I think, again, the band transcends where it was from. That, you know, and people start to realize it was way more to Twisted Sister than just, you know, the couple of songs or whatever. Way more. It was an attitude. It was an inspiration. I mean, you know, Andy Horn, who did our documentary, said he was, that's why he did the doc. I mean, he rest in peace, you know, because he said it was a Rocky story. He didn't care about once we got signed. That's behind the music. They're all the stories are the same.
All the same after that point.
But the story beforehand, the struggle, he said it's pure, it's inspirational.
It was and remains so. And we're all still here to talk about it and be healthy. And I really appreciate your time on this. I know you're really busy, and I know we kind of like shoehorned this in schedules. We really shoehorned it because this is being.
I'm leaving on vacation with Suzanne,
right.
And
we're recording this in the evening for me. You're on West Coast time. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank my producer, Matt Mallinger, as a matter of fact, right now. And I'd like to remind you guys, I'm going to be at the Stony Brook Rock at the Long Island Music Hall of Fame that's located in Stony Brook on October 8th, doing a Q&A, a book signing, and I'll be performing Lou Reed songs. And by the way, Dee, guess who's coming to play bass with me? Kenny Neal is coming.
Really? Awesome.
Yes. And Mark and Kenny are going to play together on Walk on the Wild Side, the dueling bass part.
That is really awesome. And if you, I've not been to the Long Island Music Hall of Fame, but this incarnation, because their plan is to change things up. Right now, I'm told it should be called the Long Island Twisted Sister
Hall. It is because there's huge statues of you, me, Mark, as you enter. It's kind of like
costumes, everything, you know, just guitars, everything's there. So, but I hear it's really great. And see it while you can. Go see Jay. You know, and I know I'm going on and on, man, because we could talk. That's the thing. We could talk. We have talked for hours and hours while we drove in cars. We talked forever. But people say to me, what is it, you know, that bothers you the most about your legacy? And I said, the idea that we were all pedaling as fast as we could. The idea that we were playing what we played and how we played and looking how we looked because it's all we were capable of. And there's nothing further from the truth. Individually, every person is an accomplished musician. You're an accomplished blues player. Eddie's an amazing studio guitar player. Mark, good God, what did what's his name say? Fast Fingers bass player from Tallis. Billy Sheehan played with Mark and said, I didn't know you could play like that. AJ Pirro was a child prodigy. I was a classically trained countertenor. I've been on Broadway. I sang opera on Broadway. You know, and people just sell us short. No, we played what we played because we loved it. Straight ahead, basic, in your face, rock and roll. And we wanted to be outrageous and outlandish. But it wasn't because it was all we were capable of doing. And I think that we're all showing that in our post Twisted Sister careers. You with your podcast and your book and your articles and things like that. And go see John kick ass. I know we'll be playing some blues for you. And he plays an amazing blues guitar player.
Thank you. You know, the thing is that when people say to me, why are there so many ex-members of the band? And I said, because they couldn't keep up. We were brutal. And we didn't think we were brutal. That's the whole crazy part about it. We skated through hell. And people don't understand the way we left littered behind us, all the residue. They just couldn't keep up, man. There was.
You remember when you auditioned a drummer? Walter Woody Woodward III, beautiful looking drummers with a band maybe called Rachel or something, came in, auditioned, got the gig, and then we sat him down and told him, okay, but this is the rules of the band. No chicks backstage, no getting high, no drinking, no drugs. And he said, and when we finished, he said, listen, I'm going to pass. was a fan. He goes, I'm gonna pass. Can we just do I'll Never Grow Up Now one time before I leave?
At least he was honest.
Yes, he didn't. I said, thank you for not wasting our time. Thank you for not wasting our
As
time.
opposed to all the liars, who told us they wouldn't, couldn't. Anyway, we've got to go. Thanks so much, man. Thank you for being on. More success on the book. Loved it. Bye, Frats. It's a story, as Chris Matthews said, tell me something I don't know. You guys don't know this story, and it is a story that's worth being told, and it was told beautifully. So thank you very much.
I love you, John. You're my brother.